For years, Brandi Passante kept her side of the story locked inside her. While millions of viewers watched Storage Wars and saw the undeniable chemistry that turned a thrift store couple into reality television royalty, the woman at the center stayed silent. She didn't talk about the breakup. She didn't elaborate on the rumors. She let the cameras roll and let the fans believe whatever they wanted, because her children were watching, her career was still live, and the price of speaking up felt too high. But Brandi Passante is 46 now. She is no longer the quiet second half of a power duo. She is no longer protecting a narrative that wasn't hers to begin with. And in a series of recent interviews, some recorded, some written, all unmistakably from her own mouth, she has finally chosen to say what she spent years refusing to say out loud. What happened between her and Jarrod Schulz, she argues, was not the simple love story the show sold. It was something more complicated, something that broke long before the public ever knew. And she is tired of pretending otherwise. Brandi Passante's life before television was anything but glamorous. Born in Texas and raised in Southern California, she grew up in a household where she learned quickly that if you didn't stand your ground, you would be walked over. Her brothers, she has said, were rough with her, and that early experience shaped her into someone who could handle conflict without flinching. At 19, she walked into a carpet cleaning company in Tustin, California, looking for work. She was sharp, funny, and not easily impressed. That's where she met Jarrod Schulz, a salesman with ambitions that seemed to run faster than his paycheck. Jarrod was persistent. He kept talking to her, kept finding reasons to be near her, kept pushing until she stopped saying no. Brandi has described this period in a 2023 interview with Us Weekly not as a fairy tale romance but as something more gradual. A slow erosion of resistance that turned into a genuine partnership. They moved in together. They opened a thrift store called Now and Then. They had 2 children, a son, Cameron, and a daughter, Peyton. From the outside, it looked like a success story that had practically written itself. But the work of building a life with someone is rarely as clean as it appears on paper. Brandi has explained in multiple interviews, including one with Entertainment Tonight in 2019, that she was never just Jarrod's sidekick. She ran the daily operations of the thrift store. She priced the inventory. She kept the books. She was the one who understood the difference between a locker that looked promising and a locker that was actually worth something. Jarrod, by contrast, was the face, the man who could sell a story, who could hype a bid, who could make people believe in a gamble. That dynamic worked for years, both on screen and off. But it also created a fundamental imbalance that would eventually become impossible to ignore. When Storage Wars came along in 2010, it didn't create that imbalance. It just put it on a national stage. The show premiered on A&E on December 1, 2010, and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Within 2 seasons, it was pulling more than 5 million viewers per episode. Part of that success was the format itself, the thrill of the auction, the gamble of the locker, the reveal of the treasure. But the larger part was the cast. Brandi and Jarrod were not polished reality stars. They bickered in real time. They interrupted each other. They made decisions that seemed to drive each other crazy, and yet they always found a way to make it work. Audiences loved them because they felt authentic. They were given the nickname the Young Guns, and a spin-off, Brandi and Jarrod, Married to the Job, followed in 2014. It lasted only 8 episodes, but the mothership show kept going, and so did their story. At least, the story the network wanted to tell. What viewers did not know, and what A&E never announced, was that by the time season 12 wrapped in 2018, Brandi and Jarrod had already broken up. They had been living apart for months. The relationship that fans thought they were watching on screen was effectively over. And yet, for the next 3 seasons, they continued to appear together on Storage Wars, playing the roles of a couple in business and in love. Brandi has said in a 2021 interview with the podcast Drew and Scott that this was one of the hardest things she has ever had to do. She had to manufacture the bickering. She had to manufacture the eye rolls. She had to stand next to a man she was no longer with and pretend that the chemistry was real, because the show depended on it, because the contracts demanded it, and because she had 2 children who were watching the entire thing through the lens of public scrutiny. The decision to stay silent for years, she now says, was not really a decision at all. It was survival. She had a television career that was still active. She had a reputation to protect. She had kids who were old enough to read online comments but young enough to be hurt by them. She also had a deeply ingrained belief, one she learned in childhood, that you do not air private pain in public. So she kept quiet. She let the rumors swirl, rumors about why they broke up, rumors about Jarrod's behavior, rumors about her own choices. She watched strangers dissect her life on social media forums and Reddit threads and YouTube comment sections. And she said nothing. That silence, she told people in 2022, was not weakness. It was a choice. She believed that if she just kept working, kept showing up, kept being the Brandi that fans had come to know, the story would eventually fade. It did not. What finally pushed her to speak was not a single event. It was a slow accumulation of years where the story was being told without her. In recent interviews, including a detailed conversation with the Daily Mail in 2024, Brandi explained that she felt the public narrative had become distorted. People assumed things about her relationship that were not true. People blamed her for the breakup. People speculated about her financial situation, her parenting, her personal life. And Jarrod, she said, had his own version of events that did not always match reality. She watched him give interviews after the breakup, interviews in which he painted their relationship in a certain light, implying that she had been the one to leave, or that he had been blindsided. Brandi has not accused him of lying outright, but she has made it clear that she felt the need to offer a fuller picture. In one particularly revealing moment from a 2023 podcast appearance on The Jay and Tony Show, Brandi discussed the emotional toll of living with someone who is always chasing the next big thing. Jarrod, she said, was never satisfied with what they had. He always wanted more. More fame, more money, more attention. That drive had made them successful on television, but it had also made it impossible to build a stable home life. She described feeling like she was constantly managing his ambition, constantly trying to keep their family grounded while he reached for something just out of sight. Over time, that dynamic wore her down. She began to feel less like a partner and more like a handler. And when she realized that she could no longer enjoy the success they had built because it was never enough, she knew something had to change. The actual breakup, according to Brandi, was not dramatic. There was no explosive fight caught on camera, no public meltdown. It was quiet, private, and painful. She moved out. They told their children. They informed the network. And then they went back to work, because the show must go on. For 3 more seasons, Brandi showed up on set, posed for promotional photos, and pretended that everything was fine. She has said that the hardest part was not the pretending itself but the loneliness of it. She could not talk to her friends about it because the show had a non-disclosure agreement. She could not talk to her parents about it because she did not want to worry them. She could not talk to her children about it because they were too young to understand the complexity of a televised relationship that was no longer real. So she closed her mouth and opened her eyes, and she waited. What she was waiting for, it turned out, was the moment when she no longer had to protect the story. By the time Storage Wars ended its original run, and by the time her children were old enough to navigate the online world without being blindsided by comments from strangers, Brandi felt a shift. She started doing interviews where she gave more than a rehearsed line. She started talking about the financial realities of the show, the way producers controlled the narrative, the way certain characters were edited to heighten drama, the way the Young Guns narrative was partially manufactured. She started talking about the emotional cost of fame, the way it isolates people who are not prepared for it, and the way she had to rebuild her sense of self after years of being defined by a partnership that no longer existed. Authentic sources for her statements can be found across multiple media outlets. In a 2021 article from the US Sun, Brandi discussed how she and Jarrod had not spoken in years and that their interaction on set was strictly professional. In a 2022 interview with Reality Tea, she revealed that the two had not co-parented in the way fans assumed, that she had primary custody of their children and that Jarrod's involvement was limited. In a 2023 profile in Entertainment Weekly, she opened up about the difficulty of watching old episodes and seeing a version of herself that no longer existed. And in a 2024 Instagram live session, She answered fan questions directly, clarifying that she had nothing against Jarrod personally, but that she would no longer allow her silence to be mistaken for agreement. The most striking of these interviews, perhaps, came in a 2024 piece by the Daily Mail, where Brandi sat down for a long-form conversation about her life after storage wars. She spoke about selling the house she had shared with Jarrod, about starting over in a smaller space, about the freedom she felt when she no longer had to wake up every day and perform a version of herself that had expired. She also spoke directly about Jarrod, about the good times, about the reasons she stayed as long as she did, and about the moment she realized she could not stay any longer. She did not vilify him. She did not claim to be a perfect partner. She simply told her side of the story, honestly and without apology. And that, she said, was all she ever wanted to do. Why now? Because she is 46 years old, and she has no more use for secrets. She has watched other reality stars from her era bury their truths and later regret it. She has seen what happens when a narrative is left in someone else's hands. She has also, by her own admission, done a tremendous amount of personal work, therapy, reflection, distance, that has given her the clarity to look back without bitterness. She is not angry. She is not seeking revenge. She is simply ready for the record to be straight. People think they know what happened, she said in a 2024 podcast appearance. And the truth is, most of them don't come close. Brandi Passante today is not the same woman who walked into that carpet cleaning company in 1999. She is not the same woman who stood in front of a storage locker with a man she loved, hoping the gamble would pay off. She has built a life that is entirely her own, a small home, a quiet routine, a career that no longer requires her to smile when she doesn't mean it. She has said that her children are her priority and that they have handled the aftermath of the public breakup with grace. She has said that she still believes in love and that she does not regret the years she gave to Jarrod Schulz, because those years gave her two human beings she adores. But she will not lie anymore. The silence, she says, was never a sign that she had nothing to say. It was a sign that she was waiting for the right moment to say it. That moment, for Brandi Passante, is now. At 46, she has earned the right to speak without filter. She has earned the right to tell the story from her perspective. And she has earned the right to let the world see her for who she really is, not as half of a reality TV couple, but as a woman who survived the chaos, raised her children, and finally decided that her truth was worth more than a carefully guarded script. The cameras have stopped rolling, the lockers have been sold, and the show is over. But Brandi Passante is still here, still talking, and still refusing to be written out of her own story.